Um, This opening meeting of the Acton Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's Executive Order of March 12th, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth and the local state of emergency declared by the Acton Board of Selectmen and Board of Health due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, the Board of Selectmen have suspended all public gatherings, and in accordance with the Governor's order, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The Governor's order allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations and/or board committee votes of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting, I'm going to say, will feature public comment. For this meeting of the Finance Committee is convening by Zoom conference, as posted in the meeting agenda, town's website calendar, identifying how the public may join. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that some attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you, and anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We are now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce, well, I'm going to let Roland do that. We'll introduce each speaker of the agenda, which we don't tend to have. Sorry, I'm just reading through this quickly. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in colloquy with other members, please do so through the chair, taking care to identify yourself. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. I believe that is it. As usual, our first agenda item is public participation. Roland, I'd like you to take over here if you can.
Yes,
I have no way to know who is.
Roland. Video. I can see everybody, but you guys can't see me, so.
We can see you.
We can see you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I can't see myself. That's good. I'm okay.
Can you take over public participation?
I will. Public participation. Give me a second here. Oh, that didn't work. Sorry. I just want to see if there's anybody in the attendees that have their hand raised. I don't see anybody. Good evening, Mr. Evans. Good to see you. Was one of our attendees this evening. So hearing none, we shall move on to agenda item number 1, which I don't have the agenda up in front of me. Christy, I don't know if you have it in front of you right now. You're on mute, Christy.
I don't have it. I was just looking for it.
The first item is the ALG update.
Ah, yes. So Christy and I met with ALG this morning. We had an ALG meeting this morning. Quite informative. Everybody, town manager, Mr. Barrett, were both on. Mr. Benson was on as well, so they feel free to chime in with this. Tax payments are, from what John reported this morning, close to 90%, which is really good, especially during this time that we're dealing with right now. However, there's been no appetite for 30-year debt, so the debt that we have for the fire station, et cetera, is going to be on a short-term bond, which we are lucky that we have a very high rating for short-term, as we do for our long-term bonds. And I'd like John to, Steve to talk about that bond rating a little bit, what the bond rating what it is. I would like to have that added to a point of view that we also have a strong rating on the short term as well, because I think that is important for citizens to be aware, maybe just in context. Schools right now are unsure of state aid. They are doing a $1 million adjustment to the budget. Reduce budget by 500,000 and keep 500,000 in reserves, because at this point we just don't know what's going to happen right now with all this, with the pandemic and how things are going to play out on the school side. Acton's assessment, the increase was going to be about 2.36%. With the school funding, it's going from 7.8 to 7.1% for Acton share. I believe I have that right, for Steve. You can talk about that. June 29th is going to be the town meeting. We want to get that done in one night. Kelly's Corner is being reduced from 1.3 million to 600,000 due to funding sources that we got, so that will have a positive impact on the budget. Again, there'll be short-term borrowing for the fire station, and then we'll have to rebond it at that point after 1 year. And FY21 used less of free cash. Level funding of state aid. They originally budgeted in the ALG plan as a 1.1% increase. That's going to be now budgeted at a 0% increase, so level funding there. I want to schedule another meeting for us, which we talked about at ALG this morning, to the 27th, a week from today, to go over the new ALG budget, which we'll be seeing, and see if we have to make any adjustments in town, somehow with any proposals to reduce any budgets or any costs. And so Acton's assessment on the schools of 66,012,542. That's going down to 65,584,049. So a reduction there. Jason.
So if I heard correctly during ALG this morning, the school is going to reduce the assessment by $438,500. Do we have a commensurate number on what the changes, what the actual dollar amounts were on the municipal side? Do we have a final roll-up number, or is that what we're waiting for the next ALG spreadsheet?
I broke up, so I didn't understand what you were saying.
On the school side, we have the exact dollar amount that they believe they are able to change the budget at this time, notwithstanding the $500,000 they're trying to hold in reserve. Right. The change in state aid. Am I breaking up, or is somebody else? Am I breaking up?
It's hard to know where that sound is coming from, Jason. It is bizarre.
Okay. So the change in the level funding of state aid from the town and the other things that you just discussed from the town, do we have the dollar figure roll up for what those changes are, or are we waiting for the next ALG spreadsheet to know what those numbers are?
Right now, we don't have that. John Mangiarati or Steve Barrett, can either one of you speak to that?
Sure. So in the presentation that was given to the Board of Selectmen last night, we identified $215,000 in reductions to the municipal spending package. And this morning at ALG, we discussed several adjustments to our revenue estimates that are between $450,000 to $500,000 in change in reduction in what we're budgeting for revenue. The net of those two things is 276,000 or thereabouts, 275,000.
So since the previously expected ALG consensus, you guys, the municipal side has taken down their tax requirement by $275,000, correct?
250. So basically, the municipal spending package was 2.94% increase over last year, and we reduced it to 2.34% over last year.
Okay. Okay.
And that's the Board of Selectmen haven't approved that yet. They listened to it last night, and I'm going to bring it back on Tuesday.
Okay. Thank you.
This is why we're proposing to meet next week, is to go over this. ALG will be having its next meeting on June 4th at 8 a.m. So the hope is that we will have an updated ALG spreadsheet to all review, or ALG model to review before our meeting on the 27th, and we'll be able to take any discussion from that back to the ALG meeting on the 4th.
And after the Board of Selectmen vote it through tomorrow night.
Yes,
Got it.
Board of Selectmen will also be reviewing some warrant articles for recommendations at their meeting next Tuesday. So we will hopefully have a chance to, based on what they've said, have a chance to review our recommendations a week from today.
Very good. Thank you.
Roland, you said that they're planning to do the town meeting on the 29th? June. Can I ask Mr. Benson what safety measures they're putting into place for that event?
A host of safety measures. John, John, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So we've been meeting with the moderator and the Mark Hald, and with the health director, Cheryl Ball, to understand what we could do to make it safe that day. And we've come up with a plan that includes using the gymnasium as the primary location. And
that's the upper gym.
Yeah, the big gym for the primary location, and setting it up in a way that we have people very far apart. Have a stage that's huge, that provides for a lot of separation between people that are on the stage, unlike the one that we typically use. We would then use the auditorium as an overflow room, so that if we reach a level of people like 200, where we're starting to feel like we can't separate, we would then start having people go to the auditorium to make sure that we have those numbers very low in both rooms. We would do contactless check-in. We would not use the clickers this year, keep those in the closet so that we don't have to worry about trying to clean those. We are proposing to reduce the number of articles that are being considered, both by increasing the size of the consent agenda and by reducing a few articles that we think can be discussed at a later meeting in the fall or even next year. Other safety measures include masks, hand sanitizing, trying to keep people outside as they're queuing instead of queuing inside when they're getting checked in. And it's all work that we're going to do in collaboration with the school, and it's going to take us a while to set it up. But we have a while. I don't think there's a lot going on in there right now. So that's one advantage. We're also going to try not to use the microphones in the way that we have in the past. We're going to try to use microphones that don't require you to get near them, so that no one is interacting with them physically, but they're still able to make their points. We're also going to try to limit, or the moderator is going to try to limit presentations, and we're encouraging people to pre-record them and present them digitally before the meeting, in lieu of or as the primary source, and have just a review of your presentation at the meeting. Those are several things that we've put in place that we think we can get a meeting accomplished in a few hours, rather than 2 days, and also do it in a way that we can keep people separated enough to follow the state guidelines for safety. And being June 29th, we believe we'll probably be in phase 2 of the governor's reopening plan by that point, which hopefully that'll continue to trend in the right direction, and that's where we'll be.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Christine?
Well, and you got some hands up. Jason
Jason.
was first.
Thank you. I'll ask my question, then I'll send it to Christine. Two quick questions. One, with regard to having the town meeting on June 29th, that is very, very close to July 1st. And being that I do anticipate, and feel free to call me crazy, I think we're going to have exceptionally low turnout to this town meeting. The lower the turnout, the higher the likelihood of a wild card. Are we preparing and are we submitting to the appropriate regulatory body a 1/12 budget in case of an unexpected vote on June 29th? I mean, there is literally 1 day warning if, God forbid, something goes awry on June 29th. And I'm not expecting anything to go awry, but I just feel that the margin for error is razor thin between there and July 1st. So are we preparing a 1/12 budget? And then my other question, and I'll just ask it so that I don't have to, we don't have to do the Zoom dance. How much did it cost for us to take out, and I'm not asking for the interest charge, I'm asking for just how much did it actually cost to execute the short-term ban for the $13 million? Because we're going to have to do that again next year, right? There's a charge for actually for setting up and taking out that 1 year ban. So those are my two questions, and then I'll let Christine speak once you guys have had a chance to answer it.
Sure, Jason. So to your first question, the 1/12 budget, I think that is pretty much authorized under state law if we need it. In terms of setting it up, there really, behind the scenes, there would be some work done in our financial accounting system. So, ultimately, we're trying to avoid some of that by getting to town meeting. But again, there's nothing we have to do, I believe, legally to take advantage of that. So I think we're all set there, to your point, in the hopefully rare case that we get jammed up on the 29th. To the cost for the ban, as I think the town manager said, in terms of the interest cost, it was 0.75% is kind of the line of credit rate for the year. If your question was, hey, no, I'm talking about specifically your...
How much do we have to pay the banker to set up the loan?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at that. We needed another, we get a short-term credit rating for this. As the chairman indicated, it was SP1, which is the highest rating that you can get for a short-term debt. I think it could have been anywhere from 8,000 to 12,000, but I'll double check that and I'll get something out to the committee, Jason.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, so my question is back to town meeting. Do we have the legal authority, John, to require those who enter to be wearing masks? And do we have the ability to possibly hand out at the door surgical masks, which are much more effective than any homemade mask in preventing the spread of the COVID-19 virus?
So we're going to require masks, and there are exemptions in the state and local orders. I did see something come across my desk today from town council about a challenge to that and how it applies to elections and town meetings. So I haven't had a chance to review that, but I will and get back to you on that. But to answer the second part of your question, we certainly intend to have several masks on hand for people that either forgot one, or if there's breaks during the meeting, we want to make sure we have plenty to hand out to people, in addition to hand sanitizing options.
So the science and the studies are definitely showing that even with a mask, even with a homemade cloth mask, anywhere where people are spending more than 5 minutes together, you're increasing the risk of transmission. And a mask is better than no mask, but there are degrees of what is safe. I'm wondering if it's possible to up our game a little and have a surgical mask available, not not just by request, but hand them to everybody who walks in the door to increase the safety level of everybody who's at that town meeting, including us.
That's a good suggestion. I think those have been harder to track down, and we've been focused on make sure we have enough for our first responders. But I think the supply chain is opening up a little bit, and I think that's something we could probably do. We'll look into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then the last thing I'll say is that the other hot spots for transmission are bathrooms. So if we're going to be asking all of these people to come together, they're absolutely going to use the bathroom. And, if we could have staff on hand available to be cleaning them every 30 minutes or whatever's appropriate, but definitely not just before the meeting and after the meeting. I don't think that's quite enough in this instance.
Great.
Roland? Listen, I have a question for all of you. We were trying to, since we're trying to do this, the meeting in one session, the start time is critical, and the suggestion was 6:30, and there would be no, opening ceremonies and recognitions. We had put out there last night, should we start at perhaps 6 or 5:30 or 5 o'clock? And what would be the sense of this gang as to what might be the appropriate start time, keeping in mind we would like to get it done that night. We would not like to go late into the night. Comments, please.
I'll comment first, and Christine. I like 6, and Mike Majors.
I can't imagine starting earlier.
Yeah, I imagine starting earlier, like 5 o'clock.
No,
You then
I'm sorry.
disenfranchise every adult
still work.
worker.
I still
With the
work. I
job.
still have a job. I still have a job,
Nobody's-
and I got to get over there. So I can't see starting before 6. You can't start before 6.
Yes, for my
well.
opinion, I'd say 5 o'clock. You want to finish the same night,
Christy?
and you really have to put some limits on news articles and how long people can talk.
I think what Mike's saying is the key point there. This cannot be a long meeting. It's dangerous if you're even exposed to a little bit over a very long period of time. So as much as we're spreading people out, if you're spreading people out and having them sit together for a long time and one person's sick, it's getting everywhere. So having a long meeting is just not going to work. So whether you're starting it earlier doesn't really make a whole lot of difference. If we're sitting in the same room for 4 hours, if it starts at 5 or starts at 6, it's still just getting too dangerous.
So, Hannah, you had a question?
No, I was kind of going to say the same thing that Christy said. And also, since we are, the whole, some of the articles are being cut, I thought it might be a quicker meeting than required. And certainly what Jason said, not before 6 o'clock, it's going to be tough for folks to attend.
Steve?
Yeah. So going back to the town meeting improvement committee, the key here is how long the presentations are. And so we had made recommendations to keep them pretty short, and this is a great time to try out that concept. So I think, presentations should be kept down to 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think that's what we were looking at. Also, we were, of the 12 articles, the non-consent articles of 12, 2 of them are citizen articles. The other 10, the 2 budgets, the Kelly's Corner article, some capital articles, none of them are controversial. It'll require, some restraint on some of our town meeting regulars to, hold back and not comment on every article. thank you. It looks like we shouldn't start any earlier than 6 o'clock is the consensus. Also, we're going to see if presenters, including your point of view, would have it ready ahead of time where we could tape it and then put it out on the various, make it available on the various websites for people to see ahead of the meeting. Make sense?
Does. I think if we're going to record it, then a good way not to use a microphone. Just play the recording.
Yeah, that's a thought.
Might as well make it as easy as possible. And I'm going to have to work on the point of view. I'm going to ask Steve Noon and Christine and Krista to help me out to get that together so we can be ready to go. And we can figure out how we're going to record it, how we record it, and we'll take it from there.
No, I think we can take care of the recording for you. I think we do. I think, John, we'd probably organize that.
Yeah, we could. We talked about using the moderators meeting as a potential night to record it, if you're ready at that time, or the moderators meeting could be sort of a dry run, and then we could coordinate a time for you to record it through a Zoom or otherwise, and have it posted a few days before town meeting so people can watch it multiple times if they'd like.
I would suggest if we're going to do the recording, go that route, that we have it out there at least a week prior to town meeting. Because if you have it only a couple days, people are not going to have time to watch it for whatever reason.
You're just setting your own deadline back earlier, Roland.
So, quick question. This has nothing to do with town meeting. On the side, we were doing a little chat with the messages. So, is this a violation of open meeting law? Jason happened to mention. So, just want to make sure if everyone can see the chat messages, or we are supposed to be just talking and not writing anything.
We're not supposed to be writing.
Okay. So,
just to clarify, the chat, we've been using the chat to screen audience members before they speak, just because we need to be more careful. So that's generally how we use the chat, or we have been using the chat in our meetings.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go on to our next agenda item, which I do have up here in front of me. Finance Department update, if we happen to have one this evening, with all that's been going on, how we're trending, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Mr. Barrett, Brian?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think in the big picture, the latest data we can give you, I think, which is really important, is the cash flow. I think as the town manager reported to the Board of Selectmen, I think last night, seems a long time ago, we're almost at 90% for our fourth quarter taxes received so far. The committee might remember that was like 70%, I think, on April 30th. We're at 91% for motor vehicle excise collected, 90% on budgeted fees and permits. We've already received all of 100% of our investment income. So on the revenue front, we continue to do just fine. Thanks to the residents to that. So, the revenue, the year is looking very good for FY20 as we roll into the future. But those are the updates, and we'll plan on updating those, those few percentages as we move forward. Thank you.
So I'm going to leave that as a standing agenda item right now for our next meeting as well, since this is all new to everybody, and see where we're going. Mr. Nolde, you have a question there.
Yeah, that's for Stephen Barrett. Just to clarify, is the 90% collection of revenue on track or on par with historical pace, or is that 10% which is missing? Do you think that's a result of the current COVID crisis and unemployment and those type things?
Thank you, Adam. That's a great question. So usually by the normal due date of May 1st, we're probably at 96 or 97%. So to be close to 90 now with a due date of June 1st, I would think we'd end up pretty close. Yeah, we're seeing minimal requests for relief. Through email, we did receive a bunch of questions on whether the date had been moved back. So, yeah, we might be a little bit behind, but we'll have more, obviously in a couple of weeks. But, I think some of the citizens, even our astute ones, we're a town with very astute people. If you give them another 30 days, I think they might take it. But right now, my feeling is that the deterioration of there is no deterioration of tax collections right now. We're doing just fine. Again, thanks to the citizens.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the? Okay. So Town Manager Board of Selectmen update. If there's any other additional updates to what's going on with this whole thing and the pandemic, and is there anything else to report? If not, I understand because we just met not that long ago, and you gave a good overview so far this evening. Again, that will be another agenda item I'm going to keep on there due to this. Go ahead, John.
John, do you have anything to add?
I would just want to call the Finance Committee's attention to the CARES Act and the program and how that benefits our community. Up until last week, we knew that there was money out there, but we didn't realize that the state already had it in their coffers, and they were rolling on a program to distribute to us. So we're very pleased to find out last week that Acton is eligible for up to just under 2.1 million in COVID-related relief funding. And there are certain conditions and certain restrictions on how it can be used. But the interesting thing is we always do a very good job of submitting to FEMA and MEMA for reimbursement for disasters like this. But they always fund a maximum of 75%. And one of the many things that this CARES Act funding will do will allow us to cover the gap and fill that 25%. So essentially, for COVID-related expenses, I feel very comfortable that we'll be able to be reimbursed for all of them, unless things change significantly. So that's a great one. That's some good news amongst a lot of other news lately. So, and I talked to the Board of Selectmen about it last night about some ideas we have to use that funding, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for us to make sure we continue to work hard to keep our community safe and also transform our spaces that we use to provide public service to make sure that they're safer as we operate in a different operating environment in the future.
Yeah, there's just an add-on to that, Steve Noon. COVID funds are eligible for. I had mentioned earlier that under the CARES Act, Massachusetts got $2.67 billion. The state carved out $500 million of that for municipalities, and we were awarded or eligible for just under 2.1 million. Things to keep into account. There are eligible uses for it. It's necessary expenditures incurred due to the public health emergency with respect to COVID. However, the funds may not be used to substitute for lost revenues, nor any, can they replace any state or municipal spending items that are normally in your budget. And they have to be incurred on and after March 1 or before December 30. But they can be used for rental assistance programs, mortgage assistance programs. Mike, you'd be glad to know this from our EDC committee. We've asked if local business assistance would be covered, things like rent for businessmen, in much the same way that rental assistance for individuals is used. Their response back was they didn't think so, but we're pushing hard and checking on that further.
Steve Noon and then Christine.
So I noticed that the number of deaths jumped up, actually doubled the other day. Is that the same pattern as we had? Was that mostly from congregate living situations?
Yeah, the congregate care facilities are definitely an area of concern in this community and most communities, and that there's many of the fatalities that we've unfortunately seen are in those areas. The number as of today is, I think it's still 18, but the total number of cases, in Acton that we've seen is 158, and there have been 19 fatalities as of today.
Yeah, if you want to drill into the numbers of the 18 deaths and reported deaths in Acton from COVID, 16 were from the congregate care facilities in town.
I want to thank you for starting to include that level of detail. As I mentioned last meeting, I was surprised that it wasn't there, and I definitely appreciate the fact that we're being as transparent as possible now. It's been helpful in dispelling some misinformation that was present on Facebook. Sorry, Christine, I front ran you.
So all good. John Mangiarotti, you mentioned earlier, and I meant to ask you about this, that our first responders and our EMS workers were working really hard and excessively through this period. Are we finding any issues with our staffing levels in any of the departments that are obviously more stressed these days?
No, we have been able to maintain our workforce. I think they're working hard, and it's a stressful situation to be operating in a normally stressful job. This adds a whole new element to it, but they're doing a great job. And fortunately to this, as of now, we don't have any issues in that regard.
Okay, so we have enough personnel at this time to meet the demands, is what you're saying?
Yes, I think the challenge, one of the challenges has been the nursing and how they have to do all this contact tracing. For every case that you see, there's a dozen phone calls they have to make. And then there's calls that they're handling for several ones that aren't even on a list. So I think as this continues, those resources will continue to be strained, but we do have help that we can tap if we need it. So I think we're in a good position from a staffing standpoint.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you.
I think that's it from our end.
Thanks, John. So, see if I had it. Oops, I missed over one. I'm sorry. Point of view addendum. So I hope the committee had a chance to look over the edits that were made to our point of view. I sent a few additional ones to Christine this evening. I thought on one of the slides, I don't have my notes in front of me, that we have our long-term bond rating. Well, I think it'd also be important to mention our short-term bond rating, which I believe Mr. Barrett said it's an SP1. Okay, so short-term is the SP1, which will give us also the highest credit rating in that. I think that'd be a nice. No, because the long-term doesn't tell the full story. I think that having the short-term, it helps, it fills that in of what we're lacking. And I had an issue on one of the debt slides.
Roland, hold on a second. So on the fourth slide, where we say we are AAA rated by Moody's and Standards & Poor's, what would you like that next bullet to read?
That could read SP1, short-term rating.
Who rates that, Steve?
Standard and Poor.
Okay, so we'll put Standard and Poor, short term. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay, and then Roland, you wanted something on slide 12 that I didn't quite understand what you were looking for. And also I've updated the numbers for the new school, but I am hoping to get numbers for the fire station from the town to more accurately reflect what we're expecting as far as the debt service on the fire station.
The last couple of years, it didn't happen last year. It happened the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. We bought new fire trucks, and they were bonded. Well, we went for a bond. It's a 15-year bond, or whatever the rate, 10-year or whatever. I think we need to, every time we go to a town meeting, we come with a bond, and it goes out to bond. We bond it. It should be added on the slide as a different color. It's going to roll off at a certain point. I mean, so if we're bonding $5 million, you put $5 million, and it'd be town meeting, whatever, what year, or something to that effect. So it kind of shows, or have a table that shows when our current bonds that are outstanding roll off the books, when they're paid off. So we have like a table, so it's just more transparent of what we have the town debt. We have that figure in there, which I can't see what color it is.
Well, the town debt is the blue at the bottom.
So what's in that blue? You know, what's rolling off, and what years are they rolling off? So that way, the town, if somebody picks this up from somebody new to the finance committee, or somebody, you can get a clearer picture of, okay, our debt is this, and then you see the big drop. Well, why does that big drop happen? What rolled off? And you have a chart, a table, and it'll say, oh, this bond was retired in this date, whatever year. And
okay, could I assume you'd be okay with trying to make that happen on the next point of view rather than trying to get it onto this one?
Yeah, not this point of view.
Okay.
And I think get some information from Steve Barrett and Brian as to the bonds that are outstanding, the value that they're originally taken out, when do they roll off? I mean, even if they have like an amortization schedule, it might be helpful, just so we get a better, clearer view.
Do we really want to get into that level of the weeds?
Well, it's important that you see what, you know, you go, oh, we have this debt out there, and somebody's going to come to us and go, well, what's that debt for?
Who's going to ask?
You know, it doesn't really tell the story that in 2008, 17, 18, and 19, 2016, 17, 18, we bought a new fire truck every year for $675,000.
Well, I don't think that's really the purpose of this point of view.
So I guess I would ask that we absolutely dig into this conversation for next year's point of view. But given that we're not planning to address it right now, is it okay that we not discuss it at this time?
Yep, correct.
Okay.
Something for the future.
Christine, a quick question on slide 14 in the comments.
Okay.
When you scroll down the last sentence, do I have the slide right? The CARES Act, I thought John Mangiarotti just said that it covers all the health safety measures and what we are receiving from the state. So,
but it's not covering the lost revenue.
Yeah, not the lost revenue, but and other health safety measures are not eligible. So maybe just remove that.
No, I'm sorry, but I think what it says is lost revenue due to the impact of necessary stay-at-home orders and other health safety measures we're taking, which are leading to this lost revenue. That's not recoverable.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, Christine, same slide where we talk about anticipating revenue shortfalls up to $3 million for the coming year. That's maybe overstating. It took 2 years to to get to that level
Okay.
in 2008, 2009. So I would maybe say up to 2 million for the coming year, or if you want to use 3 million, say for future years or something. But it didn't happen we didn't fall off the cliff all at once.
Okay. All right. I'm perfectly happy to be conservative and say 2, and we'll hope for less.
Right.
All right. If I don't hear anything else, then I need some final numbers on the debt service for the fire. Steve, yeah,
That's right.
That's okay.
Not specific language, but in terms of the OPEB slides, the OPEB fund balances would have taken a hit from investment losses. They also, there's 3 big assumptions in calculating the liability: investment return over 30 years, medical inflation over 30 years, and mortality. So investment returns, they're not going to be able to assume the 8% they used to for a few years. Medical inflation may actually, some of the medical industry is going to be hit pretty hard by the post-COVID situation. Prices may have to go up. The only good news here is mortality. So I don't know if, Mike and I probably don't feel the same about this, but they will probably be adjusting mortality down. But I think the other 2 factors are going to make it even worse. So I would, the reason to keep funding it is that if you don't, the number is going to get even worse in a couple of years than it is now.
Is that language you want me to add in some way, or just a position you want to remind us of as we go forward?
It's a reminder.
Okay. Okay, great. Anyone else have any changes they wanted to make to this? I'd love to go ahead and vote that we're good with this once I make the changes to the fire station debt service numbers, but otherwise we're ready for sending this out.
Okay.
Because the longer we take, the less effective it is.
You want to make a motion to that?
I move to approve the revised version of the Finance Committee FY21 point of view.
Second.
Okay. And you take a roll call vote. So I will start with David.
Aye.
Jason.
Aye.
Steve Noon.
Aye.
Christie.
Aye.
Can't hear you.
Aye.
Jason.
You already asked me. I said aye.
Oh, I did. Hey, that's great. I wish Jen was a full voting member. You're not. Christine.
Aye.
And I am an aye as well.
You didn't ask me.
I thought I did. Sahana.
Aye.
Mike Majors.
Aye.
All right, so we're all in agreement. Okay, so we'll meet again. Is there any other business that we need to go over? Any committee updates? Anything else?
I wanted to bring this up. This is a very important stuff that Steve Noon sent sometime back this afternoon about the cost saving subcommittee report from 2011. I think we should go through this document because there have been a lot of recommendations and some of them might be implemented. But it is a good idea to actually go through the list one more time and see if we can, stuff that we don't understand or needs to be added, things like that. Maybe the next time, doesn't have to be tonight.
I can put an agenda item on. We can visit that next week. I'll talk to Steve in between now and then on that.
And I had one more request. I know this was brought sometime before, I think, the special town meeting when we were going through the budgets, or maybe during the budget times, and I was not there at a couple of meetings. I know John Benson had suggested, hearing from each department in the town, what their staff does and what their role is, and just to understand the departments. Maybe now is a good time to, add those when our agenda items are kind of low. It's a good idea to hear from the town staff, just to learn more. If all of you think that's good.
I'd like to get through town meeting first before we do that. John Mangiarotti, do you have any comment on that, or John Benson?
Yeah, I mean, my thought in mentioning it was when we come up to the January meeting where budgets are presented, and they said let's drill into the numbers. I think a lot of that's done without any real knowledge as to what these departments do, how many people they employ, and exactly how are these people, what duties do they have and what do they perform? And I thought if you had that information, it might make the process go a lot better, put some face on the numbers, so to speak.
I think that's a good idea. I think that'd be beneficial if we tackle that after town meeting, going into the fall, as budgets are starting to get worked on and prepared for the following year, and we get better clarity on the budget, how that's shaping up for the year as well. I think that'd be a good idea. And I'll look at John Mangiarotti at that point once we do something like that, or the chair will, to coordinate that. Christine, and then Christy.
The school committee met right after our last meeting. Diane had given us a good update prior to our meeting, but they completed contract negotiations with the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, which makes up 43 positions within the school district, custodians, etc., and also with the AB Office Support Association, which is 39 positions in the admin support group. They had given a 1-year extension last year so that they could get all 3 union contracts done on the same year. They made note of the fact that typically in a situation like this, probably not a good idea to be going through and settling 3-year contract negotiations. However, seeing as the goal was to get them all on the same schedule and they had previously completed the negotiations with the teachers, they felt like the appropriate thing was to go ahead and complete those contracts. So they're done for the next 3 years as well. That's all.
Regarding the school budget, and Roland, I'd love if we could give everyone the presentation that Peter Light, the slides Peter Light mailed out today. Part of how the school has addressed reducing the budget for next year is they've ended up with more money this year than expected because of shutting down the buildings, et cetera. So they've chosen to pull some of the capital projects into fiscal year 20 that they've been planning on doing in 21 to use this money for that they actually have right now. So some projects are also going to be pushed out a little, but we don't need to worry too much about them falling behind. They still have a priority of working on capital projects, but they are looking at them closely with the idea of how many to keep doing, and have, as I said, pulled some forward. And I think that's it from what I would add from ALG.
Thanks, Christy. Jason.
On the school building subcommittee, they're hoping to do the test geothermal wells. They should have done it this week. So once we get the geothermal test wells back, we'll be better off knowing exactly what we can, what kind of yield we can get and where we can place things. They have had to change the placement of some of the wells, which is going to cause us about a $500,000 unexpected change. So we've had to come up with a couple of things we need to take out elsewhere. We've gone through a round of value engineering, value management to try and figure out how to reconcile the three different building estimate cost estimates that came back from Consigli, Arrow Street, and Skanska. So we do still have we're good to go for the next milestone at the MSBA, but I think a lot of us are hoping for good results from the geothermal test wells.
Please keep us posted on that, how that goes as well. And anybody else? Mike Majors.
Yeah, well, brief update for Minuteman. We're at 96.9% complete. And there's still punch list stuff basically going on. They're about, we'll have about $3 million left over, but we have started and the conversation of the athletic fields. And there's a whole variety of options of just having well, nothing which would be like a grass meadow, and then different phases, like the football field, the track surrounding the football field, softball diamonds, baseball diamonds, tennis courts. So each one of those, obviously has a cost associated with it, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to get that funding, and because it's going to be not as easy as it was the first time around with the regional support. So that's money that they're probably going to have to find on their own, and we'll see interesting to see what happens. Also, tomorrow the EDC will be meeting, and one of the primary topics is identifying opportunities where the town could possibly provide some small business support. And I was wondering if FinCom has any. I'd like to hear your opinion if there's any interest in identifying a few bucks from the town that could be made available to help some of these small businesses survive, at least the ones that if it wasn't for the COVID-19 epidemic, pandemic, they wouldn't be in dire straits. A lot of the restaurants are hanging on by their fingernails. They're surviving by not paying themselves a salary, digging into personal savings and things like that, and still volunteering to produce meals for first responders and the emergency care professionals, fire and police and nurses and so on. So, there are little pockets of revenue that the town, I think, could hopefully free up. But I think the first thing that has to happen is really a survey of what this inventory of small businesses consist of, who they are, what they need, how are they doing, and we, just from this position high up on the mountaintop, it's hard to really see what the specific needs are. Although we know some businesses are really hurting. The bigger ones are like the liquor stores are doing quite fine, but the restaurants that serve beer and wine and depend on customers to come in and sit down and enjoy meals, that they're hurting. The takeout business helps obviously, but it produces a lot of revenue shortfall. And if their expenses are based on full employment and full occupancy of their restaurants, that's another story. But there are certain things that the town can do in the form of zoning provisions and just helping out marketing through the restaurant week, as John and John have both talked about. So anyway, we're going to be coming back to you guys for some kind of support. Just at least hopefully we can identify ways in which the town can support these businesses. It may not necessarily be in a form of a financial support, but could be in zoning or marketing or whatever, helping with legislation or whatever the need is. This is small business is what gives Acton its unique character, and once they're gone, they're gone. They're not going to come back. So we can't just take this lightly. And that's my spiel.
Yeah, to be more specific, what they are really looking for is some type of tax relief, property tax relief from the town. I had asked a friend and neighbor of ours, John Regan, who owns the Hit the Net hockey lacrosse shop on 2A, to use his good head and put a tax proposal together, which he presented to the group last week. The model for it would be something like this, where if a commercial property owner owned a strip of retail space, and say his yearly property tax was $24,000, $6,000 by the quarter, he had 6 tenants who paid him $2,000 a month, each of them, for the argument, they each pay $2,000. So on his $6,000 tax bill for one quarter, we'll abate that tax for the quarter, provided that $6,000 you would have paid over the course of the quarter goes equally to each of your tenants to reduce the rent. It will be a one-shot thing for at least starters by the quarter. People on the EDC, thought, that was great. Some said, well, maybe we should run it past the town to see if the finance committee, the finance department, see if it makes sense. What they were really calling for was, we want action now, stop dithering, get going. This is a crisis situation. We're seeing small businesses, they're just not going to come back. That's a piece of the town. What's your sense on that type of a proposal?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, but that's a big piece of what we could do. But there are other opportunities, like Rapscallion, for example, proposed. They brought up the possibility of the liquor license fee reimbursement. That's kind of small potatoes. 3-month impact would be about $26,000.
It's going on. Christy?
Yeah, John, what you were just describing was basically what my idea had been initially. If we can figure out a way to make tax relief go actually to the businesses, not be giving the large property owners money for themselves, but make sure that it's offsetting the rent of our local businesses and really helping them. I'm very supportive of that.
And the town is already doing some other things by, relaxing some of the strict signage requirements that so the restaurants can advertise, if it is a restaurant, advertise that they're open for takeout. They're allowing the restaurants to sell groceries. If they don't need the sugar and flour and things like that they would normally use in the production of their goods. That's another thing. Lost my train of thought, but it's the town are doing things. Anyway, hopefully what we'd like to see is really some kind of survey, hopefully from the Chamber of Commerce or someone like that, an association of businesses that can sort of quantify the need, identify, who's hurting, how much are they hurting, and what they would like to see that we could do about it.
Adam or Jason, what do you think? Come on.
May I?
You first, Adam.
John, I really like your proposal and the way that goes through. There's a difference between coming up with a good idea and tracking and executing and administrating a good idea. And there's a cost associated with that as well. On the surface, I'd say I'm generally against ideas that lean towards socialist behavior, especially when it comes to a capitalist society. I think that businesses, small businesses such as, restaurants, hair shops, boutiques, stores, grocery stores, liquor stores, etc., are really in the business of being supported by their patrons, not by the taxpayers and not by the taxpayers' dollars. When it comes to supporting the taxpayers themselves through general relief, extensions of deadlines, that sort of thing, I'm all for that. As a former business owner and a longtime commodities trader and a shark in the water, I have to say that I think it's probably cruel, but businesses who aren't prepared to handle at least a 90 to 120 day shutdown are businesses that are not prepared to succeed. I know that's harsh, but I think I'm not saying I'm against totally helping out the small businesses in town, because we do need them, and God knows we have a lot of empty business space in town, and I'd personally like to see more businesses in town. But I'm also very cautious about just throwing the money out there. And then I also understand that there's a cost associated with administering the put out of that relief. So I know that's sort of a non-answer, but that's where I'm at the moment. I wouldn't be prepared to make a stand other than to be very cautious.
So you asked for my input as well. I'd absolutely, the devil's in the details. I'd like to see what exactly what the proposal is. If you're asking for blanket, do I think that it is the responsibility of the taxpayers of the town to bail out individual businesses? No, I do not. I believe that these businesses would still want police, fire, and other services to show up to their businesses no matter what. And those are the responsibility of the town already. Those are services that we provide to the town. Furthermore, it is not the statement of these individual entities could fail. Yes, absolutely, they could. Would that mean that spot would never, ever, forever, and again be replaced by another entity that has the entrepreneurial spirit, wants to try its hand at a restaurant? I disagree with that. I look at the corner in West Acton here, a corner of Mass Ave and Central, whatever that is, where Periwinkle's is. That store turns over every year or so. I definitely do not want to give money back to an entity that is not going to be an ongoing concern. And while it absolutely sucks to lose your entire investment, that is the risk that is taken when you enter into an enterprise. No, I do not believe it is the taxpayer's responsibility to take taxpayer funding and subsidize a corporation, big or small. Certainly because they're still going to want our services and whatnot. As I said in previous meetings, we should not be charging them for something that we shouldn't be charging them a fee if we're not allowing them to do business. But real estate is real estate. And I would also venture that the vast majority of the restaurant owners may not actually even be the landlord. So I'll take a look at the plan. I'm all for us as a committee having a conversation about how much we are willing to take taxpayer dollars, real estate dollars, to pay for a business enterprise. But my appetite is de minimis for that.
It should be noted that some of these businesses, not necessarily restaurants, but small businesses throughout the state are going to have trouble getting their people to come back, mainly because our government, again, has been so generous with unemployment insurance, giving them an extra $600 on top of that. That they make more money staying home on the government dole than they will by working. So it's going to be hard to get some of these people back. And you should know that it's the local and state government are the ones that shut down these businesses, not anything else.
It's the virus that shut down these businesses. I'm terribly sorry. It's the virus that shut down these businesses.
No, they did.
It's through no fault of the business, though, is the point Mike's making.
Right.
Understood. Doesn't change reality.
Adam?
So the real question is, we have these warrant articles that come up during town meetings, such as one of the warrant articles I worked on, which was the sidewalks. The town has to vote. The taxpayers have to vote whether they want the town to spend the $5 million, whatever it is, to continue working on sidewalks. So my question to John Benson is, does the select board see this as a warrant type article where the town is going to vote on how their tax dollars are spent? I think that's really the heart of the issue, because it's not up to us as a finance committee per se. It's not up to the select board as a decision-making body. It's really up to the town and the taxpayers how they want their dollars spent. Do we see it as an executive decision-making process?
No.
Or do we see it as a town
vote? Yeah, the question I asked John and to inquire of town council is what would be the process you would go through if you'd want to grant tax relief or an abatement. The initial comeback from town council was it may well require an act of the state legislature to do it, as well as something from town meeting. So it's nothing the board could do by fiat.
I think that's important, because no matter what our opinions are, if the tax paying body, the community as a whole, wants to put $1 million, $2 million, $5 million, or $10 million into supporting the small businesses of their community, well, then that's how they want to spend their tax dollars. Then, that should be supported.
Yeah, it's interesting. They were, some of you are familiar with the cafe in West Acton Village, Legends, which has gone through any number of changes over the years.
At least 5 in the last 6.
Pardon?
At least 5 changes in the last 6.
Well, okay. No, the current owners have been there for probably 2 or more years. But they were coming to the point where they were starting to spend their own money on keeping it afloat, which surprised a lot of people. The question I'm going to raise tomorrow is how many members of the EDC have actually gone down to Legends over the last week to do takeout orders.
Right.
Some of these businesses have been really very nimble. Here's a good story. What is it? The Blackacre Cafe. What is the name of the 2A and 27?
Blackbird.
Blackbird. Now it's the children of two longtime Acton families that have that restaurant, and they've gotten significant donations from people in town to make meals and deliver them over to Emerson Hospital. So that's the way they've got going. They've also delivered meals to the police and fire departments. And then on Mother's Day, they were open and had 603 meal orders. Imagine that. How about that? That's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, that's the point. It's not the things that the town can do may not have to be financial in nature. By easing some business restrictions, maybe allow them to have more seating, be more flexible. If it's a restaurant that maybe they could go outside, to
Mike,
keep their social distancing.
I shared my suggestions with John and John a while ago. My suggestion is we should have a best of and use it as a opportunity to cheerlead and do some free advertising for them.
Right. And they will be.
I think Christy.
While I generally agree with Adam's, you just got to go with the market forces if this is how things are going to happen. We're in a situation right now where I think you could really say this is an act of God that we're dealing with. This isn't long-term. And one of the biggest fixed expenses for any of these businesses is going to be rent. The only way we can have any control over anything, short of handing out business loans, which we're not in the business of doing, is by cutting them some slack on taxes. I don't think it's a long-term option. I'm really happy that we've done as much other stuff as we have, but if we want to make a real difference, I think that's the only area that we as a town have control over. A lot of people can do other things, and I just think we need to take that side of it into consideration. We're not talking about a specific thing. I would love to know, we had discussed briefly, I think that Steve Barrett or Brian had told me that it was something like 30% of our.
I'm sorry, Christy. Could somebody mute, because somebody's got family talking and that's all I can hear, and I can't hear Christy at all.
Is that better?
Thanks.
I think what I'd heard at the time this first came up was that about 30% of our properties are not numbers, but value in the town is commercial, but I think that was inclusive of manufacturing, et cetera. Long story short, I'd love to know if we did something like some form of tax abatement, what level that would be at. I don't think it's quite as huge as the number you might presume it would be.
Well, in John Regan's proposal, it was limited and targeted to certain types of small.
And then how legal is that, and how do you decide?
Yeah, well, they're winners and losers. It's capital.
Yeah. Well, it's like you can't get your hair cut, take out.
Right. I hope we get in there next week.
So my concern is that we have other businesses that are on a national level are considered small, but are, large in Acton. For example, today I went down, I had to have my car service at a warranty issue, everything here. And they said, well, service is coming back, it's maybe up to 75%, but there's no sales, right? So as you're the owner of that business, your business is way off. Now I was at the Ford dealer, and then that doesn't include the Chevy or the Dodge dealer or the Subaru dealer or Alpha Cars, which has one in Boxford, also has one on 2A, and some of the other ones. And so my concern there is that, well, hey, you can help if you help with a small business, then these I'm going to call them large businesses to Acton because they employ a good amount of people. are hurting as well, and you're not going to do anything for them. So that's kind of my concern, where you at that point, I feel if you're given property tax relief or whatever relief you're given, you're picking winners and losers in a way. And that's kind of hard, you know. I mean, it's you know, the Toyota deal is another one, and you know, there was a Toyota deal with a lot of property in it, and you're going to have other businesses as well. You give it to me.
The issue with car dealers, that demand is just deferred. It'll come back. If you need a car, you might have to wait 2, 3, 4 months later, but at the end of 4 months, you're going to have a new car. So their demand doesn't disappear like a restaurant. It just gets deferred.
You might wait a year. You might say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not sure if I'm going to have a job. I'm going to wait a year. Hey, I'm not. Now, my card, I'm done now. I just pushed that out 2 or 3 months, but I might be able to hang on for another additional year or two. And then what, you know, you can say it gets for a couple of months. Well, that deferral can go not only a couple of months, but a couple of years. And I look at the town saying, hey, maybe we need a new fire truck. I mean, a new pickup truck for the town. Well, we're going to buy a new one. I mean, I always look at it saying, hey, if you can buy a good used one that has low miles on it, you're better off doing that as a municipality and save tens of thousands, $10,000 on it. That's just things to look at in the future. But my concern is picking winners and losers. As Adam said, you know, the capitalist, you look at it, you know, it's like you buy an investment. You put an investment in, buy a stock of a company, you're looking at the upside. You're not looking at, hey, that investment could go to zero. I picked the wrong one. That happens. So, I mean, I think we're just going to be cognizant of that when, if they're going to make any decisions to do something and give it business relief, to look all over the other business as well. Steve Noon.
Yeah, it comes down to a lot of people are being hurt right now. Yeah, small business is certainly being hurt. But where do you start drawing lines? I mean, there are people that are being hurt out there. You know, our ability to give tax relief to our citizens is extremely limited. You know, how small does it have to be? I hear medical practices are, you know, suffering because they can't get all the money on the discretionary and elective surgeries. Are we going to give money to Acton
still
Medical?
waiting.
You know, how are you, by the way?
I need surgery.
See, so I just think it would be conceptually easy to talk about and practically very hard to do.
And not our role. Not our role. I mean, I find it very strange that I'm arguing the classic Adam Smith invisible hand here, but this is not the role of government to be bailing out private enterprise. Act of God, force majeure or not, we still have to provide services, and that need doesn't go away. And I do not believe it is the taxpayer's responsibility to bail out a private enterprise.
The EDC asked Mike and I to, you know, go to the finance committee, go to the select board, and get your opinions. So I'm glad you're offering them. So, Dave.
I mean, I like to see something be done, but again, I agree with Jason in a lot of ways, and with Adam, and with Christie. I mean.
So, you know, listening to all the conversation, I think I would tend to agree with Christy and Mike. It is an unusual situation. And as much as I would say Adam is right about this, you know, this is something that was it's something that's unusual, and I think it is, we should be thinking about doing something to be supporting these businesses, which otherwise would have, sorry, my thoughts are all over the place, but
Would you do it in the form of property tax relief?
that is one of the ways, yes. Going back to our earlier discussion, from one of the restaurants asking for a break in the liquor license, that's another small way of addressing it, though it might not contribute a whole lot. But every little bit at this point would help these businesses.
Dave?
Yeah, it's funny. I find that in a lot of these discussions we have, they tend to be very philosophical, and I think that's good, but we don't have a whole lot of information to really even entertain this conversation in my mind. Like, we talked about a few businesses. We know broadly that people and businesses are running into a lot of trouble. The town manager outlined $2.1 million the town was getting from the CARES Act.
They're eligible for.
And, I guess it might be interesting just to have a broader, sort of framework to even have the conversation rather than talking about individual perspectives, which I think is good. But if we, the perspective of the CARES Act, I'm going to make up numbers, but has allocated X dollars for individual paycheck protection, this for this and this for that, we at least would have some semblance of how that money and in general money could be allocated, rather than get into the